Hello, I'm Sean Pichet. This is my individual screencast, and I was the lead and only programmer for the Minotaur, or the Minoan Menace. So that meant I was solely in charge of making mechanics, and I didn't contribute any of the level design or assets in any way. But yeah, so this is my little code test level that I used, so I can show off the Minotaur AI. I used the base of the enemy AI to make this, but added in a few extra bits of functionality. So you can grab poison and hit the Minotaur, and the arrow is embedded into him, so I added a socket to the skeletal mesh of the Minotaur so that it always goes to the same spot and it actually goes through him. I also made it so that the Minotaur does not react to regular arrows and only to poison arrows, and he only dies after getting hit by 3 as well. So yeah, once you hit him, he can die, and we set it to play a still montage so that he doesn't get up, but the model will still stay there. I added a destructible field that any of the destructible objects in the terrain will interact with, so as soon as the arrow hits them, they break, like that. I made objects pullable, so if the arrow lodges in a object that implements the I pullable interface, when the arrow is recalled, the object will come towards the player and stop just outside of their radius. I also made some tooltips. So this is a test tooltip, and then it goes away once you leave the radius. And so yeah, that's it. That's shown in my test level. Also in the arena map, I have the tooltip trigger that I made. So this can, when you read it, the enemy over to the top left of the screen will get triggered and start walking towards you, but they won't until after you read it. So once you do that, then the enemy will come and attack you. Then you can kill him. I also implemented the enemy shattering. So the way I did that was you can't shatter skeletal meshes in Unreal, so I made it so that when the enemy is killed, it spawns in a mesh that will shatter with exact frame, or the exact pose of the last frame of the moving animation of the statue at its exact position, so it looks seamless. I also added to the end levels, when you haven't completed the objective, it tells you you must explore all the pathways, or whatever the level objective is. This is just the default one that I used in this, because the arena was also a bit of a test level for me. Yeah, so getting into some of the implementation, the hero character over here, I have the stop pullback, so it checks if the other actor implements the BPI pullable when it enters the range, and it stops it. So on the character, they have a pullback stop radius, and that's to prevent the object from going inside of the player, because there's a move component to system, but it'll just move it to the center of the actor. So I had to do this, and when it gets within that radius, it'll just stop, and that prevents the overlap issue that I was having. This is the melee attack, what's responsible for doing the melee. So it takes in the input action melee attack, which is the right click. It checks if you're currently attacking, because you can't attack twice in the same time radius. It checks if you're dodging or bow charging, and if all of those are true, then it sets is attacking to true, and then it goes through and checks any of the enemies that are within range, and that's an array of enemies, so that you can hit multiple ones at the same time if they're all within the radius. Yeah, so it'll call the push away, which will register a hit event, and then that enemy character will die. And it'll also take in a target and an angle of push origin. Yeah, so this is the push away, so this will handle any of the pullables within the radius of the player. and if they're within the radius, it'll give them a slight nudge, and this was mostly just to prevent soft locking. So like in Levi's level that I'm loading up right now, you would be able to grab these pillars, and you could theoretically trap yourself in this corner without being able to get out. I didn't do a very good job at it, but it is possible, and then with the push you can at least move the object out of the way and you won't get trapped. And then I have this just hits, or this just gets any objects that enter the hit radius. So that is similar to the pullback stop. It's just another radius, but this one's only forward because I didn't want the player to be able to register being able to hit enemies that were behind them. And then this is to remove them from the array because we don't want them to still be hittable if they are still, or if they've been walked away from that object. And then this makes the player rotate towards the mouse rotation, sets the color. This handles movement and rotation. The dodge roll based on velocity and direction, that was a challenge. So I had to get 2 separate bits of code for if moving and if still. The if still will make the player roll towards whatever direction the player model is facing and go in that forward. The if moving will get the direction of movement and make them roll in that direction, and it makes the dodge roll system feel a lot more dynamic. Yeah, so that's it for the hero character. And on to the Minotaur. The Minotaur has a similar functionality to the enemy character. It has a damage to the hero that will play an animation, which is the swipe animation. The animation has a notify within it, and what that notify does is it will tell this play montage when it's at a specific point. So we have an on notify begin. If that notify is the hit frame, then it will call the affect health and damage the hero conditions, or damage the hero function on the hero character, which will kill them, basically, which will apply damage, but in the Minotaur's case, it will kill them because the Minotaur is set to be an instant kill. And this will end the overlap, or this will end the damage when the player overlaps the hero. This also just starts attacking if the Minotaur is within a small radius. And then this is the hit by poison logic. So it basically checks if the player has been hit by a poison arrow. If they have, then it destroys, or it sets the player to not have any poison anymore. And if they have been hit by poison 2 previous times, and this is the 3rd time, then the Minotaur will be killed. Otherwise, they will just play the hit animation and will be frozen. Once the animation stops, then their movement speed will be set back to 100. And this step function spawns a BP camera shake. This spawns at the transform of the Minotaur, and that will create a really nice camera shake effect that is dependent on the radius of the player, of the player's distance away from him. So the shake will get more violent the closer you are to the Minotaur. So I can quickly show that off here. And as you get really close to the Minotaur, the camera shake becomes really violent, but far away it's not as noticeable. And then, yeah, so that's it for the Minotaur, and I'll now head on to the BP pullable. So the pullable has decently short code, but it was very difficult to write code. So the event pullback moves the component to the center of the hero character. The event stop pullback will just stop this function, which is a really nice function to have on this block, and it made this entire setup possible. And then the event push away takes some nice trigonometry math that Kyle helped me figure out, and all it does is it pushes away in the opposite direction of the player. So when the player shoves, it'll move in the opposite direction of that. And on to the BP tooltip. So the tooltips are used throughout the level to tell a story and also to give the player hints about how to play the game. On to the tooltip. So the tooltip spawns a widget when the player overlaps with it, and it deletes the widget when the player leaves. It has to have a do once here, as for some reason it will spawn multiple widgets, which is not ideal behavior because it'll only delete the most recent one. The tooltip also has a tooltip text, which is an instance editable variable. So when it is placed in the world, the designer can go into this tooltip text variable and edit what they want it to say, and it will show up in the tooltip widget, which I also created. Well, I didn't create the artwork, but I created the widget itself. It takes in a string, and that string is passed in through the BP tooltip and will be set to the tip string, and then that widget will just have whatever text is set, and it's also wrapping so it doesn't overlap. The tooltip trigger is very similar, except for it can only be triggered once, and it also triggers an enemy. So it has a reference to an enemy to trigger. You can set that to any of the enemies within the level, and then that enemy will start moving once the tooltip has been triggered and left the area. The enemy character has a almost the exact same functionality as the Minotaur, except for the getting hit by poison logic, and it also implements the pullback. So the pullback in here is also done through the iPullable interface that I created. That just has a pullback and a stop pullback, and that just allowed the code to be a bit more generalized. So it just pulls it back to the center of the player object, but it stops when it enters the stop pullback radius. The hit by arrow plays a statue hit animation. It plays a hit sound at the location of the mesh. This is just for the tooltip trigger functionality. This basically makes it so that the player can or cannot move if there is enemy active is set to true or false. So for the triggerable enemies, we have the enemy active checked off, and then they can be activated when the tooltip is triggered. We also have a damage the hero and a enemy death. This is the most unique part of the enemy character. So it will turn off the controller, it'll spawn an enemy destroyed sound, and then it will spawn a statue shattered. So this spawns at the exact location, except for the scale, of the base actor, and it will just spawn in a statue shatter BP that is the exact same frame as the final animation of the pull, and this creates a really nice seamless effect where you can't tell that the models are actually changing out, but they are actually at runtime, and then you can actually shatter the object because you can't shatter skeletal meshes. Yeah, so this is just the statue shatter. So all it is a static mesh with an external strain within it, and that external strain will just break the object. I also programmed in the functionality for the menu screen, as well as put in the buttons and all that. So it just is very simple functionality. When the player hits the start button, it creates a loading screen widget, which kind of simulates a loading screen. It just has an overlay that loads right before the level loads that says loading, and it kind of fades out the screen a bit. I thought it was a pretty good effect without going into all the intricacies of a actual loading screen. This also happens with the end level, and then this just makes the mouse cursor be shown at the start. This opens the credits scene when the credits button is played, and this just closes the game. Yeah, so the end level has it where when the player overlaps, it checks if they have won. If they have not won, then it spawns a tooltip telling them what the win conditions are. So this is just set by a text variable. It's very similar to the tooltip text. And then it spawns a widget with that tooltip text. And exactly the same as the tooltip, it deletes it when it has left the radius. If they have one, then the door opens, it plays the sound. After the door opening animation has finished, which I just did by a delay here, it constructs a loading screen widget. It adds that to the viewport, creates a similar effect to the main menu where it just fades out and has a little loading. And after 0.2 seconds, which is just to ensure that that loading screen widget loads properly, it opens the next level, and that next level is just set as a object reference, so you can change out the order of the levels quite easily by just going to the end level within each level. Each level has their own win conditions. So for example, this is the win state of Diana's level, which is where you have to collect the key and kill all the enemies. So the only way that I could really figure out how to do it was on an event tick. It checks if it sets the keys left. It sees if there are any more pottery in the level that have a key. If there is, then you haven't collected the key, so you can't win. If there isn't, then it checks if there are any enemy characters left. If there aren't, you have killed all the enemies. It sets the win condition to true, and that will allow you to open the door. Thank you for watching my showcase of my individual contributions to the project. It was a great time working on it, and I had a lot of fun. Thanks. Bye.